full production value, week number 6. Also, my window is not closed, and then let me get this back panel on. So chat, if you were just there for a second, or if you're watching on YouTube after the fact, I was just sitting here for a good 10 seconds because I thought that I was still in editor view. In Streamlabs OBS, you can have what's called editor view, where you basically have the live view and then you can edit another view on the fly, and then you hit the transition button at the top and it moves the view that you were editing over to the live view. So it basically keeps you from prematurely moving to the wrong scene when you're not ready or there's something that you need to tweak, you know, like a weenie, which is like what I just did. So Joshua, good to see you, sir. I'm doing well. How are you? I'm just getting my panel turned on. Watch this, chat, watch this. Hold on, let me pull this up. And then, bah! A little bit more light. We'd love to see it. But Joshua, we're doing all right. Thanks for checking in. Joshua, I appreciate you always being here and showing up and showing out. I don't think that I can count on one hand the number of streams that you've missed. Every single stream, you always pop in and say, hey, and it's always nice to have people like that drop in and say what's up. So I appreciate you, sir. Thank you for being here. Chat, today, as you can see, I'm alone on the desk. Well, not alone. There's, let me bring that music down again real quick. Where are you? It's over here. What in the world? Hold on, okay, not that. Bro, everything on my third monitor over here is wigging out. Cause like, no, not that. I have like, there we go. I had like an internet window that was just ever so slightly off the top of the screen, so like I couldn't grab the bar at the top and like maximize it. Mechanyx Origin stream time, you know it, Rocket. Rocket's another one that's always showing up and showing out. We got the ride or dies in it. I mean, everybody that comes through is really ride or die, but you guys are like extra saucy ride or die. But yeah, I am alone on the desk today. We don't have any guests, and Paige is out of town enjoying herself and hanging out with the other Andrew. Her partner's name is Andrew, but my name is also Andrew, but I go by Drew. So I figure I'm alone on the desk. I can do whatever I want. I mean, we could kind of always do whatever we want to begin with, and Paige usually reels me in. But today we're really going to do whatever we want, and so I'm like, well, I don't know that I've ever really told the full story of Mechanyx GG before, and it's probably going to be a multi-part series because there's a lot of history and a lot of fun in there. But as we're going along, if you guys have questions about how, like, different parts of the story, feel free to chime in and maybe we'll go off on this like weird segue. But yeah, we are very much going to do the origin story of Mechanyx GG today, and so I hope that you're excited. It should be a good time. And I figure it's a great thing to fill the air while I'm alone here and we're waiting for everybody to come back next week. So yeah, that's going to be the game plan for today. As far as Mechanyx updates, I don't really have a ton of Mechanyx updates today. Just a lot of stuff on the back end. I've also been kind of busy this week prepping for a meeting that I just had, actually. Many of you guys know that I build guitars, and so shout outs at MadLad Instruments on Instagram. Go follow me. But there's this really, really sick guitar shop where I live, or near where I live, called the Guitar Sanctuary here in McKinney, Texas. And I've been going to that shop for, it's close to a decade now. And the people there have always been knowledgeable. I've met a lot of really good friends. Shout outs to Brian, Trey, and Taylor over there. And I basically took one of my guitars in there and I said, hey, like, tear this apart. Tell me what I can do better. And there was a lot of really great dialogue. I have a kind of pretty much a whole new direction for MadLab that I'm going to be taking the company in. And so I'm really, really stoked about that. So you make sure you want to make sure that you're following me over on Instagram at MadLad Instruments, because you know, the maddest of the lads got to be me. And if there was ever going to be a MadLad Instruments, it would have to be my thing, so we call it MadLad Instruments. But anyway, so I was in there and they gave me a lot of really great feedback, and hopefully I can put that feedback into action, start creating some really, really good stuff, continue to hone my craft as a luthier. A luthier is a maker of stringed instruments, by the way, in case you didn't know. But yeah, so I was prepping for that. I was working on some guitars and all that good stuff. So Sorry, I got a text from a buddy. Just want to make sure everything is good. I had to fill out some paperwork for a church thing earlier too, and so I think that's what that text was about. Just want to make sure it's nothing super duper pressing. But yeah, so I built a guitar, I took it in there, and they kind of tore it apart. Not metaphorically speaking, they didn't actually like disassemble the guitar, but they gave me a lot of really great feedback, and I'm super duper thankful to all of them. So Trey, Taylor, love you bros. Brian has been my guitar guy for years and years and years. I think we all need that one person in our life that we kind of go to and we're like, hey, this is what I want. And then through their infinite wisdom and their experience and everything, they're like, no, this is actually what you want. And then they steer you away from making really, really bad decisions. Brian over at the Guitar Sanctuary has been that dude, but for me and my guitar playing. So yeah, hopefully you guys have one of those in your life. And as is production value tradition, I'm going to make sure that I have my notes somewhere. So today is 8/28/24, and we have been doing 5 minutes and 54 seconds of intro. So we're going to go 0:00:5:54. We're going to call that intro. In case you guys are watching this after the fact on YouTube, you'll see down here that there's chapter markers. We do those so that you can navigate around a little bit. But if you're watching this live on Twitch, which by the way, go check out twitch.tv/Mechanyx. Actually, don't do that. Go to this really awesome platform called Mechanyx.gg, Mechanyx.gg/Mechanyx. All the links to all the socials are there. Don't just follow on Twitch, follow on Instagram, follow on all the places. But if you're watching this live on Twitch, which you can follow us at the official Mechanyx page for Mechanyx, then you get to watch me write these timestamps live, and this is how I keep track and when I go back and edit. Make sure everything's Gucci gang. So we got that. So without any sort of Mechanyx updates to get into, I think we'll just kind of jump into story time. And then we'll be playing some Fall Guys a little bit later, so if you guys are interested in playing Fall Guys, let me know. But for now, this is very much going to be kind of a podcast style. Really, most of these videos have been kind of podcast style. Aaron was mentioning it to me in the past. He's like, yeah, I really enjoyed like doing podcasting and stuff in my old org. And it's like, yeah, well, we don't market it directly as a podcast. These are very much videos that you can have like pulled up in another tab somewhere and just kind of listen to when you're working. So if that's the case, or I think I want to get to a point one day where people are using these videos as like the key to like knowing that you have a sultry or like a nice sounding voice is that people listen to your voice when they sleep. I don't think Midweek Hang is ever going to be that, because we usually have pop-offs and we have laughs and stuff like that too, which probably isn't conducive if you're trying to sleep. But this might be one of those videos where you just kind of listen to it and you can fall asleep to it as I tell you all these wonderful stories about Mechanyx GG. So let's get into it without further ado. Mechanyx GG. So, as many of you guys know, in case you don't know already, hi, my name's Drew, Ais4Drew. I am a co-founder and lead software engineer at Mechanyx GG. I've used that line before to introduce myself, but a lot of you guys may not realize the kind of story that has been brewing that got us to the point where I can say that now. And so today I'm going to be telling you guys kind of piece by piece, chronologically, how we got to Mechanyx GG and all the pieces that kind of got us to where we're at today. So I didn't know how far back to go on this particular story, but I guess I can really... Hey, this is what I'll do. I've had this discussion with people where people ask me like what I do, and I kind of give them the Cliff Notes version of this, but I'll expand on it. So I grew up with autism. I grew up with Asperger's syndrome. And so if you know anything about autism or Asperger's, and I'm super duper stoked nowadays because people are a lot more accommodating of autism and Asperger's than they were back in the day. And so back in my day, it was just like you were the weird kid and you got picked on and everything because you were different. And I think that's still the case today. People are still kind of being picked on eons ago, many moons ago. You're right, Rocket. But yeah, shout outs to all my TISM bros out there, TISM bros and gals and non-binary pals. But nowadays, I think we can all kind of laugh about autism a little bit more. And for some people, it's not a laughing matter. It's not a joke because it very much affects the day-to-day lives of not just the people with autism, but also those who care for them and everything like that. So I'm not giving like a blanket pass to anybody to just crack jokes about people that have autism, especially if you are neurotypical and you don't have autism yourself. But every once in a while, as somebody that has like gone through treatment and is dare I say, a little bit well adjusted. I see all the jokes that people make online about autism and Asperger's, and I think they're funny, but realize that a lot of people may not. So be very, very careful. I would just, as a general rule, like don't go out there and be like, oh yeah, Drew like told me that I can make fun of people with autism. Definitely don't do that because it does affect people in different ways, and it can be very traumatic for some people. But all that's to say, back in my day when you had autism or Asperger's, it was a little bit more tricky because it wasn't like a joking matter. You were kind of the weird one and ostracized and everything just because you weren't interacting with your friends in the same way that other kids were, or you weren't like socially developing as quickly as other kids were. But props to my parents. I love my mom and my dad. They worked tirelessly to kind of figure out what the best treatment for me would be, especially at a really young age. And the decision became that we very much need to let Drew live his life and kind of live in the real world because the real world isn't going to be super duper accommodating. He's got to learn to live in the world unchanged until he can get to a place where he can change it himself. So, yeah, I was kind of always put into situations. I mean, I would still go to like sped classes and like social skills classes, and I would have accommodations so that like I could take a little bit longer on tests and stuff like that. But I was always very much thrown into like groups with my peers and made to like talk and interact and get adjusted. So I think that really, really helped with me getting socially adjusted in the long run. So I say all this to illustrate or kind of paint a picture of like my early life. And the main ticket here is that autism and Asperger's basically made me not really get along with kids as much. I mean, I wasn't like aggressive or anything like that, but if I had the choice between hanging out with my friends or like going and playing a video game or, hanging out inside, I would probably be hanging out inside. And as I'm sure many of you guys know, if you ever know somebody with autism or Asperger's, that it's they're very, very gifted like logically, like mechanically, scientifically, all these sort of things, logically, these things tend to make sense to people with autism and Asperger's a lot more than social interactions do. Because social interactions can be very, very nuanced. Nonverbal communication is just that, it's nonverbal. So you're not telling me, so it can be hard for me to interpret those sort of things. That's about what I went through in my early life. I also have autism. Well, very cool. Yeah, I'm not asking that anybody come out or out themselves, but yeah, if you can relate, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, and I think there was a theory when I was in high school that, and it was loosely based. I think it was purely anecdotal. I don't know that we have any sort of clinical or empirical evidence to prove this, but a lot of people think that autism and Asperger's is kind of like the next step in evolution. Like eventually all humans were going to be somewhat neurodivergent and somewhere on the spectrum. And I think a lot of that came from just the numbers generation over generation. It used to be like 1 in 100 kids have autism or Asperger's. Then it was like 1 in 86. And eventually, I think by the time I got out of high school, it was like they were charting it at like 1 out of 44. So it's like naturally, that's just what we're gravitating towards. That or the diagnostic criteria just got a lot looser and a lot more things. Or it could have been that they got tighter. And we now have more diagnostic criteria to properly diagnose people with autism because previously people would say like, oh, they're just like a savant or, they have bipolar disorder or something like that. But all those things that were previously labeled, those things are now discovered to be autism or Asperger's. And so now we can better diagnose it and we realize, yeah, the number has always been this high. We just haven't had a way to measure it yet. And so that's where we're at. But anyway, getting back to it, I much preferred like playing with technology and playing with computers than I did hanging out with my friends because friends would, it'd be very, very hard. They might say or do something that's very nuanced and you might miss something or you might not have the social skills to interact with that person. But computers are binary. By their very nature, computers are binary. So with that, I would always get a yes or no answer, a yes or a no, like the computer worked or it didn't work. And when it didn't work, I wanted to know why. It wasn't one of those cases where people were sneering at you or you did something wrong and you have no idea what. No, computers were very explicit and it fascinated me. I always like really enjoyed going to the computer lab. And back in the day, shout outs to Kiker Elementary in Austin, Texas. We Apple did a really, really good job back in the day of giving grants to a lot of different school districts to get them early. They got them early. Like, if we can get them early, we'll have an Apple consumer for life. So Apple was very, very strategic. And so we had Apple computers, and we had the original iMacs with like the color. They were like a CRT. Actually, let me pull it up here. Let me show you. We had the blue ones. I remember we had the blue ones, and they had all these different colors, right? And this was the exact one that I had. Let me bring it over here real quick. So the iMac G3, these were the ones. And big old CRT monitor, CD drive in the front. And the thing you got to know about CRTs and old computers especially is that their ventilation was absolute ass on these. Like, they weren't thermally regulated very, very well, and they were just basically designed in such a way that they wouldn't overheat or scorch anything. But if you get a bunch of these into a computer lab, let's say 20 or 30, and you line them up on rows of tables, and then you let a bunch of elementary school kids hang around or like, go into that room, it was a sauna basically. Like, we would walk into the computer lab and it would just be an absolute sauna. And so, but it was fun because I remember going in there and there was this game called Mouse Control. You had like, it taught you how to use like a mouse and everything, but it was like a scuba diving game. Like, I remember the scuba diver and everything. I think it was ported from like an earlier version of Mac OS, so it was still in black and white, even though the iMac had like a color thing. So this is what I'm talking about. We're getting lost in the minutia here, but yeah, so like I really enjoyed being around computers. I really enjoyed working with technology and playing video games and stuff like that. I had a buddy, Troy, down the road that I would always go over to his house and we'd play like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I remember it was a big deal when he got Halo, and his dad also played Halo, and so we would play LAN, and so both computers in the house would be playing Halo, and we would be like yelling at each other from down the hall. It's like, hey, good shot, or like, come on, what's going on? And this will give you a little bit of a foray to GameSpy Arcade. So back in the day, we didn't have like as big of like online services. So in order to play online, and again, this was proto online gaming before like Xbox Live and stuff like that too. So this is like 2000, 2001. And so there was GameSpy Arcade and it had this really eye-catching logo. It was just like, look at that guy. So this was like the proto sort of server that you would use to get into games. So here you can see like Counter-Strike over in here. But what was really cool about Halo is that this was just directly integrated in. So like you could play campaign, you could play local, or you could play online by GameSpy Arcade. And then you would get into this big like list view. It didn't look exactly like this, but it looked something similar to it. And so, yeah. And you had to have like the right internet. It had to be fast enough. Like, all that's to say, I don't think you guys really grasp, or I don't even grasp it fully, but there are very few people in this world that fully grasp the amount of extra network topography and like network infrastructure that underlines a lot of these games. Like when Xbox Live first came out, it was just a miracle of like online gaming because finally we had this infrastructure and these services to be able to play online games effectively and efficiently. And so, but yeah, going back to 2000, 2001, Halo, GameSpy Arcade. Needless to say, Troy's computer didn't have a good enough internet connection, so we never played online. Or maybe we were told that we couldn't play online, but I always thought it was cool because that was like an M-rated game and we were playing it, but as long as nobody told their parents. Well, I mean, Troy's parents played it, so he was cool with, but like I didn't tell my parents like that I was playing Halo. So that was a good time. So here's a young Drew going through elementary school, doing all these sorts of things, getting really, really in love with technology. And at some point, I started playing a lot of games. I remember my dad telling me this one time. He's like, yeah, I always remember when you would play like Age of Empires, and then like you would get bored of playing Age of Empires, so you'd go into like the scenario editor. That was really old school, the iMac 3G. Yeah, it's throwing it way back for sure. But yeah, so like I would play games and then I would get bored of playing those games. So then I would go into the map editor and kind of start creating my own scenarios and stuff like that. And you know how it is back in the day when you're playing Age of Empires. You get like 50 catapults and then like maybe 10 villagers and then you wall them off and you have all the catapults like shoot at them at the same time and then you win in like 30 seconds. That was the kind of stuff that I was doing, but it was fun. Um, who hasn't been in a game or who hasn't set up a little test map where you literally just like throw a bunch of siege weapons and try and take down a bunch of villagers or that sort of thing? There's a whole YouTube channel now. I think it's called like Death Battles or something like that, where people literally do that in like totally accurate battle simulator or whatever that game is. So, but I was doing it. That was my stuff back in the day, and every other kid did it back in the day. The I guess the point is there that inside of every kid is a gamer that desires to set up weird scenarios where it's completely one-sided and you just win really, really quickly. So, but that was entertaining back in the day. So I would play video games, then I would get bored of those video games, and then I would start creating like scenarios within those games, pushing like the map editors to the limits and seeing what I could do. And I think that really kind of like sparked my intrigue in programming and learning to make my own games. And so long story short, I did a little bit of dabbling into game design and stuff like that, but my mom flat out told me, and this was probably when I was like beginning high school or whatever, because I think I wanted to be a game designer, but my mom's like, there's no money in that, dude. Like, you're gonna like make one game, you're gonna work on it for years and years and years. It'll be popular for a couple weeks, and then it'll be on to the next thing. And Mama was right, because that's basically what AAA gaming is right now. You have the hot game right now, and then, at least for right now, let's date this video a little bit. Let's see what everybody's playing right now. If we go over to Twitch, what's the top category at the moment? I mean, besides Fortnite and Call of Duty and stuff like that, but you know, there's like that one game that everybody's playing. It used to be Helldivers. Before that, it was... Oh, Once Human. Once Human is the one that's going on right now. Black Myth Wukong is popular right now. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Final Fantasy 14 is kind of just always popping off. So, yeah, here you go. Exactly what Rocket said. Black Myth Wukong right here. Top 4 after Apex, which is like a standalone, just chatting, and then Final Fantasy 14 because they got new content. But, oh wait, this is what we think you'll like. Maybe this isn't the most popular, but Black Myth Wukong. Shouts. So, yeah, and so I kind of started to think of that. It's like, well, I still really like technology. Let me do something with that. And I eventually landed on cybersecurity. Like, I wanted to do some stuff in cybersecurity. And I ended up studying some of that in college, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, so I made the decision to move over from game design to just kind of programming because it was something that I was good at. And I remember... What was I thinking? Oh, I was just looking. Twitch has this new feature where you can collab with people. Like, there's a whole section with like looking to collab and stuff like that, which I think can go one way or the other, but it's kind of cool on paper, but I digress. Anyway, so technology, wanting to kind of work in cybersecurity. And so, yeah, I just kind of knew that technology, I was going to do something in technology because that's what I was good at. And I remember, I think it was like my junior year or my senior year, I went to Half Price Books and I found this like Intro to Java book. And I think I still have it. When we're on break, I'll go see if I can find it. But this book literally like just had these fun little programming exercises that you could use to help you to learn Java and everything. And so what I did, I remember one time, I think we were going to pick up my grandparents at the airport, and my dad was like working that day, but he was taking a half day. My dad was a chemical engineer, by the way. And so I think that's where a lot of my brains or my technology like leanings came from. Also, my dad is maybe kind of sort of on the spectrum or undiagnosed. We'll see, but we've kind of joked about that. But yeah, I remember one time we were going to go pick up my grandparents or something like that from the airport, but it was a half day and it was like during Christmas break. So I was like, hey, Dad, like, you're just taking a half day. Can I just kind of ride with you? And then that way I can be there when I pick up Grandma and Grandpa. He's like, sure. And I realized that this may seem on off on a tangent or something like that, but I'll bring it back here. So the reason that I bring this up is because I remember literally sitting in his cubicle with my laptop and I was working on these little exercises and I would do them and I would show them to him like, hey, Dad, check this out. Like I made this little thing where like if you type in your name, it'll give you your initials. And he just thought that that was so cool and everything. And so that was really where he started championing and encouraging me to do programming more and more. And when it's your dad or your mom, but by the way, my mom's affirmations will come into play here in a little bit, but it's just just like when your parents are congratulating you for something like that, it's just like, yeah, this is really cool. Like, I don't want to say that my dad was a negligent father or anything. If anything, he was an overly loving father. He would always make sure that he tells me that I'm proud, and that's why I always say like I'm proud of you guys and everything. So nothing but love in the world for my dad. But it was just one of those things where he had always been supportive of me, but this felt like a little bit extra. This felt like he was just being a little bit more endorsing, and it just hit different. I guess that's the way that I would say it. And so, yeah, I was doing these programming things and everything. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I think I'm going to probably be doing something with programming or technology in my life. Cybersecurity is the most demanding area in this time of the world for what I know now. Yeah, absolutely. Cybersecurity is always in demand. They're always designing a better bad actor, or bad actors are always getting better. But by the way, a little tidbit for you in the cybersecurity world. The term hacker in the cybersecurity world is a term of endearment. A hacker, as it originally started, was a person that was just really, really good with computers. You were creative. You found creative solutions. You would hack your way around until you find something. Hence, yeah. So like when I hang out in cybersecurity crowds and stuff like that, we're always calling each other like hackers or like good hack, this hack. I hack this, I hack that. So it's very much a term of endearment amongst cybersecurity professionals and people within that sphere. It got appropriated by the news industry and sensational media and stuff like that to now mean like somebody that uses a piece of technology for something illicit or illegal. But that's not at all what it is. A hacker is usually a term of endearment. What you're describing when you talk about something that is doing something bad or somebody that is doing something bad or illegal, that's a bad actor. So I always make sure to delineate that like when I say that bad actors are getting smarter, what I mean is people that are using technology in a negative way. I don't ever use the term hacker to describe somebody like that because in true nature, they're bad actors. So I'm trying to reclaim the word hacker for the hacker community. And I feel like if we continue to make that distinction, I'm doing my duty to my fellow hackers and my fellow cybersecurity professionals that hacker is very much a term of endearment. We should use it as a term of endearment to mean somebody that is very good with computers, and we should use bad actor to describe somebody that is doing bad things with a computer. So, with that in mind, I was talking about hacking, that sort of thing. Oh yeah, we were just talking generally. Joshua was saying, cybersecurity is always in demand because bad actors are getting more and more complex in their ways. So anyway, I ended up graduating high school and I was working at Cinemark Theaters. That was one of my favoriteest jobs in the whole wide world. I worked at Cinemark Allen 16 off of 121 Waters. I'm getting like very, very close to home school territory or home territory, so I got to be very, very careful when I'm just like naming off locations. But I do all of that to like kind of let you guys paint a map and see where all this was kind of going down. But yeah, Cinemark Allen 16, one of the best jobs that I ever had. The pay was absolute garbage. It was minimum wage, but it was one of those jobs that like you work there because of the people. Like the people were a total vibe, and so that's what kept you around. And so yeah, doing the Cinemark thing, and then I got an opportunity to go work for their help desk job, and I immediately went from one of the best jobs that I ever had to the worst fucking job that I ever had. There's a thing, and I'm not trying to be like holier than thou or pious after the fact, but I went into what was a semi-tech job, I would say. So it wasn't like a full-on like technology job, like a developer or analyst or anything like that. I was working help desk. So help desk is like technology adjacent, but it's not like high technology. It's like I don't want to say pseudo technology, but we were basically a support role. We were not developing anything necessarily. We were more in support. So long story short, remote phone support for all of our theaters. They called into this place. I don't know how much I can say. Also, they may have renamed the department, so this would be a moot point. But yeah, and being young and in a tech job like that, I was just like my first or second year. Actually, it was my first year in college because I had just graduated high school. So I was 18, 19 years old and I got into this job. And I'm with like 20, 25-year-olds who are working these help desk jobs. And so just the snide comments and the little things like, oh, yeah, like, you're super young, or look at how young he is, baby face Drew and everything. It was insecurity more than anything. I think that they saw me, and again, this is where I don't want to get arrogant, but like as a young professional doing that job and also going to school full time. It didn't work out. I didn't end up making it. I was working 40 hours a week plus also going to school. Well, I did for the summer. I worked 40 hours a week for the summer, but then when it started to get to the point where I was about to go into college, I just basically said, fuck this job. And I found another job. I had a job in hand and then I moved to another job. And there were some good people. Like, there were some people that saw through the bullshit and they're like, yo, Andrew's kind of a cool dude. Like, he's young and that sort of thing. They weren't so insecure about the fact that I was really, really young and I was working this job that they were working when they were older. So shout outs to Shane and shout outs to Leandro. You guys know who you are. And there were some other cool people, but I don't think I name them off. But yeah, it was just a really toxic environment. And oh yeah, Joey. Joey, if you know who you are, you know who you are. Joey and I actually used to work at the same theater, and he moved up to help desk first, and then I moved after the fact. But as I was working that job, the reason that I illustrate that is because God will put you in some absolute dog shit situations sometimes. And the reason that he puts you there is because there's something that's going to transform you. There's something that's going to like change you. And then in this case, it literally changed the course of my life for the next 15 years. So, well, not 15 years, but like 10 years. Yeah, I'd say 10 years. So at this job, I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm looking for another job and everything. And I have this idea for an app. And the thing about my mom, so my dad is this very loving and caring and just endearing figure. My mom the same. My mom was very loving and endearing and everything like that, but my mom was always the rationalist. I would have these very big grandiose ideas and my mom would be the kind of person to say like, hey, bring it back, think about this, think about that, that wouldn't work because of this, that wouldn't work because of that. And then I'm like, okay, fine, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. So I was very much conditioned growing up that mom is going to be the one that's going to like keep me in check and everything, and more than likely she's going to shoot down my ideas, and that's okay because some of the ideas were maybe a little bit bad, but anyhow, mom very much kept me grounded. Was very much the rationalist in the group, and so I have this idea for an app, and the app was basically an app that was designed to help people do group orders for food. And so my mom, like what I always talk about, she worked a job. She was like a 911 dispatcher and eventually moved her way up to supervisor and then director of communications for the entire police department in the town that I lived in, which was pretty cool. We'll maybe have to get into my mom's career some other time. But yeah, so they would always do these late night food runs. Hey, who's getting food? What do you want? They'd write it out on a scrap of paper. And oh yeah, there was this other time too. They kind of coalesced. That part was important, but also at the same job, this dead end job that I'm working, I go to Freebird's World Burrito in Frisco, Texas, off of Main Street and North Tollway. I think it's still there. And I walk in and I see this lady that has this like handwritten list and she's really struggling to like decipher the words that are on this page and try and order for everybody. So it was that. And then my mom was always complaining about how she had to coordinate like group orders and everything. So I'm like, you know what? It would be really cool if there was an app that could do all of that for you. And so I started working on it. I installed the Android development kit because I remember I had a HP laptop at the time, and if you want to develop an iOS app, you have to have a Mac computer, or at least you used to back in the day, because you have to download Xcode, which is the Apple internal development engine or environment, IDE. And so I was like, okay, I can't write an iOS app, let me write an Android app. And so I got the Android development kit, the ADK, and I started working on some stuff and just crashing around. I was designing like little UIs and like I knew it was a really big deal when I like was able to have a button. I could click a button in the emulator and it would move over to the next view because before that it used to be crashing all the time. This just shows you the level of competence of programming that I had at the time. I went from doing this little program in core Java that like created your initials based on your name to now wanting to write a full-fledged like application and everything like that. So that was a pretty spectacular jump. And I'm not saying that I was good at it, but like my code would crash everything. I'm doing that to illustrate just like the leap in competency that I would have needed to achieve there. So there was a very, very big kind of jump there. So yeah, the app started out as kind of just like a group order platform or like an area where people could create group orders or like a list online for group orders. And so I'm working on the Android development kit. I've got my little app. I'm like working on UI layouts and everything, stuff like that, getting some prototypes built together. Code is crashing every single time I try and load it. Just a big old wall of exceptions, and then the emulator doesn't load, and I'm just like, what the? Because like I really didn't know what I didn't know at that time. And so I'm working there. I'm sitting there at the kitchen table, and my mom comes in. She's like, "Hey, what are you working on?" I'm like, "Okay, here we go. I'm gonna tell mom. She's gonna like shoot my idea down, and I'm just gonna be on to the next thing." So I'm like, "I'm working on an app." She's like, "Oh, what does your app do?" I'm like, "Well, it's an app that helps people coordinate group lists. You know how like you do orders online, or like you always complaining that at work you can't do like, group orders and everything. So I'm doing an app to help with that." Here it comes. "Oh, I think I might use something like that." I'm like, what the holy like mom just like validated my idea. Mom just validated my like thing. There's something to this. And so again, talking a little bit about God as a Catholic youth minister, I feel like I can talk about that, but God just puts you into these, like, this is why I say that God puts you into these positions. Like, God put me into this dead end job, but had I not gone to that dead end job, I would have never gone to Free World's World Burrito on Main Street and North Tollway. Are you guys getting it, by the way? That's Free World's World Burrito on Main Street and Dallas North Tollway in Frisco, Texas. So I would never have had that opportunity. And so that was kind of a blessing from that job. And I eventually moved on from it and everything like that. And so, yeah, that was the proto idea for a app that was called Food for Group, or FFG for short. Whack ass name, I know. It's kind of funny, but it's like, hey, it's an app that helps people coordinate food orders for groups. We'll call it Food for Group, FFG. So, yeah, it eventually evolved from being an app that helped people coordinate group orders to allowing people to order online for group orders to just straight up doing e-commerce for restaurants. That was kind of the natural path. And so, but we haven't gotten to there yet. I'm still working, or I work at this job. I go from that job to then working at the Apple Store. And I've got plenty of stories that I could tell you guys about the Apple Store. Maybe that's part two of the full history of Mechanyx GG. But yeah, so I'm working at the Apple Store. I'm still working on this app idea, fleshing things out. I'm just every single day trying to write code, learn something new, learn how databases work, because I know I'm going to need somewhere to store all this stuff. You can't just store it on the device. So I have to learn something about databases. Oh, let me learn about MySQL. Okay, that's not working. And then you bash your head against MySQL until you learn MySQL. And then, like, so yeah, I'm very much like bashing my head against the wall, learning a lot of programming. I'm not saying that like I'm a savant or anything like that, but I very much just like learned what I needed to learn to get what I needed done. And again, I didn't know what I didn't know because I was still very much a new green programmer at that point. And this, for context, was about 2012, 2013. So if we call that year zero or year one, from there, 2023 would have been me writing code for 10 years. And I'm not saying like writing production level code, but like I started studying programming at like 2013, and now 2023 would be 10 years. So 2024, this is my 11th year of writing and learning to code and stuff like that. So with that in mind, I go work at the Apple Store, and I remember I started in the technical side. I started back at the Genius Bar, and I thought that was really, really cool because Genius Bar was like a step up. I felt like, you'd have to start working in sales and then you move over to the Genius Bar. I'm starting right at Genius Bar. That's really cool. And it was me and two other technicians that started at the same time. So we just jumped right into Genius Bar. Later come to find that it's not really a jump. You can get hired into either the Genius Bar or you can get hired into the sales side of things. And there's so many different names now. Apple had a name for it at the time, what those roles were. It's changed since then. So I'm not going to get into those details. But I remember going in and doing my onboarding paperwork, and I had the idea for Food for Group at the time. And Apple being a very litigious and very affluent technology company, there was a IP disclosure form. And I basically had to state like, hey, I had this idea before I came to Apple. If I develop this into a successful app, then you guys can't take it. And I wrote Food for Group right there. And I remember the onboarding manager that I was working with, she's like, oh, I think you're the first one to ever fill that form out. I'm like, that's just another sign. That's showing you that something good is happening or something's happening there. So I'm working at Apple. I'm working as a Genius Bar technician. It wasn't as bad as the help desk job, but also you realize really, really quickly that people that own Apple products tend to maybe like the finer things in life, or they have a little bit more in the way of economic resources, and in some ways that makes them entitled. Not all people. I've known plenty of very affluent people that aren't the least bit entitled. And so, but for the most part, like people are frustrated with their devices. They use their devices for all sorts of different things. So you get a whole host of different people coming through the Genius Bar at all different levels of frustration, calmness, that sort of thing. So it was a very tense job. And I remember one of the ways that we would cut loose is we would have these game nights every once in a while. Our store leader, his name was Gene, he was really, really cool. He would have these store-wide game nights. So on Sundays, we would always close at 6 o'clock. We would stay after a little bit, and we would bring our consoles or bring our computers, and we would play games, or there was some board games and stuff like that. It was game night, Apple Game Night. And I remember Gene had announced one right when I got hired. It was like one of the first or second game nights since I had gotten hired. And then I I was like, cool, I think I'll go to this. And I had been playing a lot of Magic the Gathering at the time. And so I remember there was an email that came across my inbox. It was like a store email. There was this guy who's like, hey, I'm excited for game night. My name's Jordan. I play Magic the Gathering. And I think he was just putting the word out there. And once you guys learn a little bit more about Jordan, you'll know exactly why he did this. But it's just like, hey, my name's Jordan. I play Magic the Gathering. I'm going to bring my cards to game night, just seeing if anybody else would be interested. And I replied back, I'm like, yeah, man, I play Magic the Gathering. And that Jordan is the exact same Jordan that many of you guys know as Has Materials and who is my business partner and co-founder of Mechanyx GG. Mr. Has Materials, his real name is Jordan. Amazing dude. Been a best friend of mine since basically back then, 2012, 2013. We hit it off and we met at game night. He just immediately struck me as somebody that was charismatic and caring and just had a genuine heart. And we played Magic the Gathering and that's how we kicked it off. So if you guys are ever wondering how me and Has met or how Drew and Jordan met and eventually formed the partnership that was Mechanyx GG. It was over Magic the Gathering at the Apple Store. So met Jordan. We kind of worked together for a little bit, got a feel for it. We were hanging out outside of work and everything like that. Started to build a really great rapport. And I think we were hanging out one time at like In-N-Out or Beat Ups. I can't remember. And this is where it gets shady because I don't remember the exact time when I asked Jordan if he would be interested in the project, but yeah, it happened at some point. And so I guess we'll just put a footnote in there that I had asked a couple different friends and stuff like that, and they had kind of shuffled in, shuffled out, and it's like, hey, don't think this is working out, like that sort of thing. But Jordan was one of the persistent ones. Jordan stayed around. Like Jordan always had good ideas, and he was always at every meeting and all that good stuff. So Jordan was very much a mainstay. And the thing you got to know is that when you're starting a company, especially a technology company, especially around the time that we started, I think Silicon Valley was a really popular show on HBO. So everybody had this premonition of like starting their own company, their own Silicon Valley company, and hitting it big. And like, so I think I had a lot of pretenses. It's like, yeah, I'm starting a company. I'm a tech bro. I'm a tech CEO and everything. But the thing is that title doesn't mean shit in the early days. If anything, it means that you wear a lot of hats and everything like that. I think a lot of people get into it. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this thing. We're going to make a bunch of money. I'm going to be a CEO, a big highfalutin and everything. You don't even comprehend. I think a through line through all of this is that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think just on a general scape, a lot of people don't even know what they don't know about starting a company. It is ridiculous. It's easy to file the paperwork and everything like that, and you think that you're very much going to be in your silo, like you're going to be this inspirational CEO that just has all these great ideas, and somehow you're not going to have to pay your dues with like doing all these different things because somehow you're different, you're brilliant, and you're better than all the rest of them, so you're going to skip all that. But you have to know that there's common knowledge for a reason, and so I kind of fell into that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like a tech CEO. I'm going to organize these meetings. We're going to work as this, that, and the other. And then you realize that you're just working on a project with a bunch of your friends. Like it's not that deep yet, bro. And so like I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs or people get stuck on like the titles and division of responsibility and get everything organized, but just focus on your product. Go build your damn product. Go like refine your product, do everything. Anytime that you could be like rambling or like networking or doing your big boss stuff, point is like if you don't have a product, you need to be working on your product. If your product isn't making money to where you can carry weight around and say that, hey, I'm the CEO and people know what you're talking about, like they know your product, then you need to work on your product. If people don't know what your product is, you need to work on your product. If people are using your product and they think it's dog shit, you need to work on your product. If people know your product but it's not making money, it's costing you money, you need to work on your product. So through all of this, just go work on your product. Forget all the pretenses, forget all the like the titles and everything like that. Work on your product. And I think part of that was like a lot of it was in flux. We were just kind of prototyping. I should say I was prototyping. I was writing a lot of the code and everything like that. The other guys were kind of just like following my lead because again, we don't have a whole lot of skin in the game. I basically asked them to work for free and do these things. And again, I'm thinking that I'm big time CEO, so I got to get ready to roll and I got to do divisional responsibility and everything. But at the end of the day, it came down to me just working on the product. And so I'm working on the product. These guys are kind of just in a holding pattern. Whenever I need a meeting or I need feedback, we get together and we talk about it. So yeah, there's that. We eventually start to iterate on it and everything like that. Jordan was one of those people that stood through and through. And so yeah, we were all kind of working on this idea. And when I say we, eventually just landed on me and Jordan. So me and Jordan are kind of working on this idea. We don't know when we're going to launch. We don't know this. We don't know that. You know, work is really taking time. Jordan went full time. I was still doing part time in school. I was working on this through school. I may have sacrificed a grade or two or had to retake a class or two because I wasn't paying attention during class because I was working on my product, because you should work on your product. That's the theme. And so, yeah, I'm doing all these things and doing all this kind of sacrifice. It's not a huge sacrifice, but I think the ethos or the cadence was like, hey, we don't want to counteractively, like, you know, I'm thinking that I'm a big time CEO. I need to organize everybody. Like I wanted to play CEO for a little bit, but at the same time, we also didn't want to play the game of like doing startup capital and everything like that. It's like, hey, why don't we do this grassroots? And I feel like most of the reason that we did that was because the product was still very much in flux. We didn't know like what it was going to be yet. So we didn't want to take on all this money, have all these outside investors come in, try and steer it which way or the other. We lose creative control and then we get thrusted out, because you hear horror stories of that happening in the Valley and everything. So we wanted to do everything grassroots and we wanted to kind of do it our way. And so that still has happened with Mechanyx. We're still doing it grassroots, you know, 5 or 10 years later, but it's also put us on hard mode. It immediately put us on hard mode, nearly impossible mode, because you're going to have to fund a lot of this yourself and work from basically zero. But with that, you also get to maintain creative control and, you know, not have to be, you're not like a flailing tube man in the wind. Like you don't have to go this way or that way, whichever way the investor tells you you have to go. You can kind of do your own thing. So with that in mind, we were working on the stuff, and again, not sure when we're going to launch. You know, work is busy, everything like that, but we'll get to it. Then the news comes down in 2018, because I remember, was it 2018 or 20? Yeah, it would have been 2018 because it was my 5-year anniversary. I started working at Apple in 2013, moved over to, or what, I left Apple in 2018. And long story short, and funny enough, I was telling Trey and Dallas at the Guitar Sanctuary this exact story. The understanding that I had of this whole situation, they ended up closing our Apple store. And they had closed our store and one of the other stores in our immediate market that was just like a couple blocks up the road. And the reason that basically that happened, as I understand it, has to do a lot with patent litigation. So in order for a company to be sued in a patent court, they have to have a presence in that jurisdiction. And one of the most like easygoing courts for patent litigation is in East Texas. That's the one where like Samsung and Apple, and they're always battling it out. It's always in the eastern whatever district of Texas. That district happens to overlap our market, or where our 2 Apple stores were. So as I understand it, Apple never confirmed this to us, but this is what we heard from people within the store and everything and online. Apple closed our store because that would allow them to not have a presence in that jurisdiction, and thusly they couldn't be sued in that court. So it was this weird loophole. Can't validate if it's true or not, but that was kind of the reasoning that we were given. Well, not given by Apple, but that was what everybody was making sort of. So to be clear, Apple never clarified the exact reason why, but what people were telling us was that it had to do patent litigation, all this other stuff. So needless to say, if that's the case, it sucks because we were kind of the bottom line. We got cut, but in the long term, it made more sense. But joke's on Apple. because I took this as the perfect time. I had saved up a little bit of money, and I was like, okay, we're going to go out. We're going to make Food for Group a thing. Jordan still had to work full time because he had a lot more responsibility than I did, but we're going to do this thing. So I leave Apple in 2018. I cast off, and I remember the day that I left Apple. The following Tuesday, I had my first meeting for a potential client with Food for Group. And I won't say too much more about Food for Group other than that we spent about a year. It was hard to get off the ground because online ordering is very, very competitive. We were really targeting like small business and pop-up sort of things. We had one client. Not going to get too much in there because there were some good times and some bad times. I'd prefer not to talk about it. And then it's really not prevalent. But what did happen as a result of that year and, trying things out and learning a lot, this is really where I felt like, because I had been learning how to program and all that stuff and write production ready code, but now my code was actually in production. Like it was being used by people in a production environment. So if 2018 is like the watershed moment where, speaking of water, make sure to hydrate everybody. 2013 is when I started learning to really program seriously. 2018 was really when I first started like using production code and I was writing production level apps. So if you want to consider that when I became a professional software engineer because my code was making me money, small amounts of money I should say, but it was making us money, then 2018 was, I guess, technically that threshold. So learning a lot about client management, learning a lot about how to maintain code in production environments and that sort of thing, learning how to build a product out and service it in a live production environment, all sorts of great skills learned there. So we're doing that. We have this one client, and as I'm reaching out and talking to other people in the area about, this platform and, what we're trying to build, I meet a guy named Will at a food festival. We'll call him Will S. Will, you know who you are. Will has worked in the service industry for a little bit. He starts this foundation to help service industry people with stuff like insurance and medical bills and stuff like that, stuff that usually isn't covered because service industry is kind of notorious for not offering a whole lot of benefits. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of hours for not a lot of pay. You do it for the passion, basically. So Will was going to start this foundation to help out service industry people. And so I sit down with Will and his wife, and we have coffee in North Dallas, which is a really, really nice area of town. It's over by White Rock Lake. So we sit down, we have coffee, and we're like, hey, we're looking for a platform to be able to do donations and stuff like that. Is that something that your platform could do? I said, no, not exactly, but that's not to say that we can't build something around it. Like, let's work together and let's build something. And maybe we can call it, I don't know, you're giving money to a cause, you're giving money to help somebody out, you're giving it to the cause. So that's where to the cause came from. And that was really, we've been here for about 30, 40 minutes now. This is the proto idea that would eventually roll in to be Mechanyx GG. It all started with To The Cause, and it all started on Food for Group, and that's why it's important. So we did end up working with Will. I'm still good friends with Will. I text him every once in a while. He's an amazing dude. If you ever see him, if you're in North Dallas, you go check out his restaurant. I don't know how much I can say, but just know that he's a chef in North Dallas. So you'll probably eat his food at some point or another if you're in our area. And yeah, COVID happens, 2020. Our client says, hey, I'm going to take a break from doing pop-ups and stuff like that and kind of step back. We're like, okay, cool. Food for Group didn't really work out, so we need to pivot. And Jordan had been hanging out on Twitch chat with one particular group of brothers, or pair of brothers, named the Cool Guy Zone out of Ohio. And he'd go to their Smash tournaments, and I tuned in a couple times just to check it out and really feel. And at this time, I wasn't too familiar with Twitch. I kind of knew Twitch from like the really big streamer side of things. So I always thought that like when you're on Twitch, you're like, oh, I'm going into Twitch, and there's going to be hundreds of people, like they're chatting. Streamer's not going to care about me. I'm just going to kind of be a fly on the wall. So when I went into the Cool Guy Zone stream on Sunday, and I said, hey, my name's Drew. Like, I'm here from Jordan was telling me all these sort of things, or Haz was telling me the good thing. And like, they were reading my comments out live and like saying my name and stuff, which is completely common practice for small streamers now that I know. But that just kind of gives you the frame of reference that I knew about Twitch at the time. And I've learned a lot about Twitch since then. Um, so we're hanging out with the cool guys on. Jordan has a good rapport with them. And so I was like, hey, we should make a pivot. What do you want to do? And he was like, well, we both love gaming. And you should know that if I hadn't said it before, Jordan is more of the business side of things. I do the product and like the coding and everything like that, and more of the outreach. Jordan is a business strategy phenom. I don't want to say genius or guru because those are tired terms, but Jordan is very, very good at dialing in strategy and figuring out like where, how, when, and what we're going to compete with. So he was always good at this kind of strategic side of things. And so at every point where Mechanyx needed a business pivot or to pivot onto something, then it was Jordan. Jordan would have the idea. And so Jordan here, again, shining, absolutely over the moon with his, awareness and that sort of thing. It's like, hey, why don't we pivot into something like in streaming or eSports? We love video games. This is something that we've always been interested in. Why don't we do that? I've already got this rapport going with this group, Cool Guy Zone, and why don't we do something like that? I'm like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. So I'm like, hey, can you set up a meeting? And he's like, yeah, let's get it going. I remember it was like Sunday evening or something like that. We were hanging out on a Sunday evening. I think I had to rush home after youth night because I was doing youth ministry at the time too. And so I rush home to make this meeting, and I'm talking to these two guys. We sit there for an hour. Jordan opens up talking a little bit about the community and all that good stuff. He had been on voice calls with them before. We did introductions. Hey, my name's Drew. Hey, that's Jordan. Nice to meet you guys. We basically go through, we talk to each other, understand like their needs and everything. And this is literally the formula that I still use when I'm talking to potential clients for Mechanyx now, is that I will sit down with them and it's basically like, hey, tell me about yourself. Like, what is your story? Where are your challenges, that sort of stuff. It's all standard sales practice. Like, you start by building rapport, you understand the challenges, and then you position your product in such a way that it solves those problems. But you have to know what the problems are first before you can start positioning solutions. And so doing all that. And so I do that, and we're talking to them, and I'm like, hey, we have this platform called Food for Group. There's a service on it called To the Cause. You can take donations that way. Is that something you'd be interested in? Like, I don't have a platform. We don't even have Mechanyx GG. I don't think we even own the domain name yet. But it's like, hey, this is something that we were working on. It can work for you guys in the interim, but if it works well, or this is something that you're interested in, we're looking to pivot over. So I'm going to start building that out, and then you guys could use To the Cause on Food for Group. Excuse me. In the meantime, to get you there. They're like, okay, cool. So we do the pitch, and then Walty and same name, the two brothers, they're like, hey, can you give us like 5 minutes to just kind of talk it over? And we're like, yeah, sure. So they go out, and I think they have like a smoke break or something like that. And I'm thinking to Jordan, I'm talking to Jordan, or I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh man, we blew it, or like, I don't know what they're talking about. They're probably going to decide one way or the other, but I don't know if it went our way. They came back and they said, okay, yeah, we want to work with you guys. I'm like, again, holy shit. Like, there was the holy shit moment when like mom said that it was a good idea, and now there's this holy shit moment that like we're pivoting over, and now Mechanyx is going to be a thing. So we partner with Cool Guys Own TTV. They set up a campaign on Food for Group, again, still Food for Group, and they started taking all these donations to get same name a new chair. And they did make the goal, by the way. The community was very, very generous, and they made the goal. So same name got his chair. And so now I have to pivot over and create a platform, a whole new platform, a whole new aesthetic, but it's now called Mechanyx GG after Mechanyx Codeworks, which was the parent company that owned Food for Group. That was kind of like our Mechanyx was the company, Food for Group was the product, but now Mechanyx is the company and Mechanyx GG is the product. So we just took the name of the company and made it into it. A lot more mysterious and a lot more fun than Food for Group, because that literally just tells you what it is. It doesn't have a whole lot of sex appeal, but Mechanyx, that has sex appeal. By the way, if you're wondering what Mechanyx is, it's a play on the word mechanics, like ICS, like mechanics as in people that maintain something, or like game mechanics, the set of mechanics that govern a game or something like that. But this is a great time to use a visual aid because my camera needs to load. But the NYX has to deal with the Greek goddess of like the stars and the skies and stuff like that. So Mechanyx is a play on mechanics, but it's NYX, hence the star theme and everything like that. Because Jordan and I both love stars and constellations and stuff like that. So that's why the Mechanyx aesthetic is all based around like stars and constellations and stuff like that, because it's in our name. So, Cool Guys on TTV. First Mechanyx GG content partners. And I don't know, this pretty much puts it at like 1 hour exactly for this story. And like, I may need to organize my thoughts a little bit better for this next part. But what would eventually come was a paradigm shift. We went from having one client that was, kind of lukewarm, could be very abrasive, and we just didn't work well together, so to now working with these two amazing brothers, and they were very accommodating. Their community was accommodating. It was a very big shift. And I'm so, so thankful. I thank God that we made the shift and I found a place that I felt comfortable, because in the food and service industry, I never felt like we belonged. It always felt like we were kind of suits, if that makes sense. Like we were trying to come in and position this thing, and service industry people have gotten burned by people like that before. And not saying that we were, because we were truly genuine, but like a lot of people have tried to take service industry for a ride, and we just never really fit in. We got blackballed for some things and some miscommunications as well. We won't have to get into that, but it was an immediate paradigm shift from being in this rough situation with one particular client that's a little bit abrasive in this industry that didn't really seem welcoming, to a place where we always belonged, and that is in the gaming and eSports industry. So, Cool Guys on TTV kicks off a beautiful... It's been 4 years now. I've got 4 years of history to get through. I don't know if I can do it all in one pass, actually. We might have to split this up a little bit, but let me set you guys up with a little bit of a cliffhanger here. We went from that stark, dark place to now being in a place that's welcoming, meeting some of the most genuine people that I've ever met. Really, really cool. And I had to learn a lot. I had to relearn a lot of things, like when it came to client management and stuff like that, because I originally thought, like, if I made even the slightest little mistake or that sort of thing, that I would be, like, getting berated, or, I was always worried about that one text coming across where somebody would say something and like it would be bad news and everything like that. So I was very much conditioned to be getting bad news. And so I had to relearn that. I had to relearn that, like, people can be genuine and people can be appreciative of the work that you do and everything like that. And so Mechanyx and our content partners up to this point have helped me to relearn that, because they are truly genuine people. They are truly selfless people. And we've had some bumps along the way too, which we'll get into. But yeah, it's hard for me to find words, and I realize I'm being very, very terse because I'm just kind of trying to make sense of it in my head, that like that shift was amazing. Getting to move over into a place where you're appreciated again, it was just so, so needed at the time. And again, it's just another God moment in a series of God moments that have led to this point. But 4 glorious years, 4 amazing, amazing years have gone since then. Met so many incredible people, developed an amazing platform. But I feel like a lot of this was just like laying the groundwork, and I haven't talked anything about actual mechanics yet, so I feel weird putting a cliffhanger here. But Mechanyx started with To The Cause. It was just To The Cause, and then we met one particular... That's what I should do. Okay, so this is actually a perfect setup, because Paige is going to be back. Paige plays a huge role in Mechanyx history, actually. So I have set you guys up with the story so far, the proto days before Mechanyx GG. It's kind of like the prequel, basically. And then it really starts to heat up with Cool Guys on TTV. I have some stuff that we can talk about there, but it would be super duper cool to hear the events and collaborate and corroborate a lot of what I'm saying with Paige, who was actually the person that we interacted with. So Paige was content partner number 2 or 3. I think Dark Razard was, they're about the same time, but point is, Paige was an early on Mechanyx GG content partner. Now she's director of eSports at Mechanyx GG, which is crazy. That just shows you the amount of scaling up we've done in 4 years' time. But I can tell the story of how I met Paige, and we can kind of walk through, but The service that came right after To The Cause was Stardust, and that was a collaboration between UltiPage and I feel like it would be much better if we could tell the story together. So next time on Dragon Ball, no, next time on Mechanyx Midweek Hang, or the full history of Mechanyx, we will be talking with UltiPage. I'll have to talk to her off screen and like we'll coordinate it, but I would love to retell the story from my end and then Paige can tell it from her end. You guys can literally hear firsthand account of like how all that built up, how we built Stardust, and how we set Mechanyx up for success from that point, because it was just this little platform that was shared by a couple content partners, and now we are scaling up, working with organizations, working with all sorts of amazing creators, and we're just growing every day. And it all started there. So I want you to hear the history from two people. So we'll get into that next time. But for those of you guys watching on YouTube, thank you guys so much for being here. We do these midweek hangs every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. If you want to tune in, check out the link down in the bio below, mechanyx.gg/mechanyx. That's where all of our socials are. You can follow here on Twitch as well as our other social platforms. We'd love to see you stop by for a live taping for one of these, or live stream of one of these, and you can have your chat in here and be part of the dialogue as well. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. Thanks for being awesome. Be good to one another. Chat, we're going to play some games, so don't you go anywhere. But for those of you guys, say bye to YouTube. But be good to one another. Remember that you are wanted, you are loved, you are appreciated, you have a special talent that nobody else has, and the world is waiting on you to bring it out. So muster a little courage. Go out into the world and change it. That's what the world's waiting on. You. Go make it a great day. God bless, and we'll see you at the next one.